Hello guys and welcome. On this episode I'm going to show you how you can create a Chrome extension, and as an example I've created this extension called Design Review, which is a tool for creatives or managers to be able to edit live the website they're seeing and take a screenshot with their changes. So without further ado, I'm going to show you the final solution and then we will jump right in. So here I have the Chrome extension guide. This is the extension I created. So there's two buttons. First, we're going to enable the design mode, which I showcased in my last video about the top 11 tools in Chrome DevTools. So let's click the enable button here. And as you can see now, I can edit anything on the page. So let's change this to what are Chrome extensions. And maybe I don't like this paragraph, this image. Can I remove this? No, can move it a little bit. Okay, let's say I'm done now, and I go here and I click take screenshot. I save it. I open it, and as you can see here, my changes are visible. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and create a folder here called Design Review. Let's in the inside and open up our favorite edit. As it says here, the first thing we need to do is create a manifest file, okay, called manifest.json. Basically what it means is this is the file that contains all the information around our Chrome extension, what scripts it has, what its name, the description, the version, and all this good stuff. So let's go and add a name. The name will be Design Review, version 0.0.1, description, a tool for creatives to visually alter a web page, generate a screenshot, and discuss with colleagues. Next is the manifest version. I'm going to follow the suggestion by this page, so I'm using the version 2 here. For permissions, we need only permission on the active tab. Background scripts, I will explain later what they are. For now, bear with me. Persistence, false, scripts, background.js. This has a browser action. Default title is Design Review. Default pop-up is the file pop-up.html. And lastly, we have some content scripts. It's an array, accepts an object, and this object has one of its keys matches. So this basically says when is this extension activated, on which pages, and by using this sort of regex here, we tell the browser that this is can be available on all web pages. For CSS, I'm going to provide style CSS, and for JS, we are going to provide content script.js, and we want to run this after the document finishes. We want to run this when the document is idle. So what did we write here? Apart from the usual suspects, name, version, description, we have manifest version. which is, as I said, followed here, and the browser now knows which manifest version to use. For permissions, we need only active tab. And now here we are declaring that we will be using a background script called background.js. It's not persistent. If we close the tab, for example, we are declaring that we have browser action with a default title to be design review, and when you click it, like here, it will show the pop-up, and the file for that is the pop-up.html. And then we have our content scripts. So we want to activate the content script when it matches any web page. We want to use style CSS, and the JS file is called contentscript.js. And we want to run this when the document is idle, which the description says that document idle is the default. I omitted here, but I wanted to make you aware of it. So it says the browser chooses a time to inject scripts between document end and immediately after the window.onload event fires. The exact moment of ejection depends on how complex the document is and how long it is taking to load, and is optimized for page load speed. So this is pretty much as suggested by Google, the best option, unless you have some really specific use case. Okay, let's move on to creating the pop-up. And yeah, let's first create a pop-up.html file, and I will just go right ahead and create all the required files we have here, and also fill up the style CSS and then proceed to the HTML of the pop-up. So we have a styles CSS, we have a background.js, we have a pop-up.js, and we have a content script.js. Now for styles, I won't write much, so bear with me. We have a container, it's a flexbox. Also, we want to style the screenshot button, 100% width, background color, slight red color, a bright red color. For color, we want white, no border, font size 14 pixels, border radius 5 pixels, padding 5 pixels, margin top 10 pixels. Okay, that's pretty much it for the CSS. And let's move on to the pop-up HTML. So here we have the standard structure of an HTML document, and the only additions we are going to make are, we need a link to the styles here, and in the body we have a div with a container. Inside that we have a div with a span of design mode, and a button with an ID of toggle design mode button, and the default text will be enable. Also we have the screenshot button, take screenshot button, and lastly we want a script that points to the pop-up.js. Okay, now let's try to load the extension. I will first remove it from here, remove from Chrome, and now let's go ahead to extension. I will close this to show you opens, more tools, extensions. Now you need to enable the developer mode here. So you have these options here, and you click on the load unpacked option. You go to the directory and you select that. There we go. As you can see, we have the title, the version, the description here, and we have the default icon here, which is gray background and the first letter of the title. You click it and now you see this pop-up interface here. Now let's go ahead and make a communication. Now let's go ahead and create the functionality for the design mode button here. So as I said, this is a pop-up, so we're going to use the pop-up JS here. The first thing I'm going to do is capture the element, the button in this case, using the get element by ID, and I'm going to attach an on-click handler here, which will point to the toggle design mode function. Let's create a const here. And in here now, when we click this button, we want to trigger the design mode or disable it. Now, the pop-up itself doesn't have access to the DOM, so it doesn't have access to this page or this page, and we need access to the DOM so that we can do document.design mode equals on or off. So to do that, we need to add functionality in the content script which has access to the DOM. And how do we communicate between the two? The Chrome extension has access to an object called Chrome, and it has several APIs defined and available for use, which enable communication between the different parts of the extension. In this case, we want to communicate from the pop-up to the content script, and to do that, I'm going to call a broadcast function call here, and I'm going to give it a type. In this case, it will be toggle design mode. This function is created by us, it's not part of Chrome, and it accepts a message, and inside here we're accessing the Chrome object and we are querying the tabs. We want a tab that is active and it's the current window, and this gives a callback with all the tabs. And here we're going to send a message to all these filter tabs. In this case, it's only one because we want it to be active and to be the current window. So we're talking about this tab. So in this array, it will be only one tab. We are accessing the first one. We provide the ID. We provide the message which we get from here, and it's this object here. The third argument is a callback function with the response. For now, it's empty. Now we need someone to listen to this message, and this is where we are going to write logic in the content script. Again, here we have access to the Chrome object, and we are adding a listener when a message comes in. So the first argument is the request, the sender, and the response. Now, so because we are going to write a few, we need to write handlers for a few messages here. I'm going to create a const with all the actions, and our first action will be toggle design mode, which will point to the toggle design mode method. I will explain in a bit why we're doing like that. Now we have a toggle design mode function here, and I will just leave it empty. Now here we are going to call actions. We're going to check if this type of action exists, call it. Like that. So let's recap. We click this button here. This button triggers this function here, which broadcasts this message to the active tab. The listener here listens for the toggle design mode by first checking that it exists in this object, and then we are calling its method here. Now in this method, as I said, the content scripts have access to the DOM, so we have access to the document object and to design mode. So here we want to either make it on or off. So first we check if it's off, then we set it to on, else to off. Now to switch this from enable to disable, we need to pass the current state of the design mode back to the pop-up, which, as I said previously, it doesn't have access to the DOM, so it cannot know the design mode state. So to do that, we're going to return a message here with a type of toggle design mode, and the payload will be the state of the design mode. So to return it back, as I said, there is a callback, right? So we first get the reply to the action that we called, and we check if there is a reply, because not all actions will return something. If there is a reply and it's not null or undefined, pass it to the callback, like that. Now the pop-up needs to handle this, and this is where this is the appropriate pair to handle it. So first we're going to check if there's no response, return, just for the sake of it, and then we create a switch statement. We check the type, and in the case of toggle design mode, we go ahead and get the button for the design mode, and I check the inner HTML. If the response payload equals to on, then I write disable, else enable. And let's break here and also have a default with no operation. Now let's test this out. First we're going to the extension here, and we're clicking this refresh button here. Reload the page, click here and click the button here. As you can see, we can enable and disable the design mode. Now what if something was going wrong and we wanted to debug what happens in the pop-up? We can right click here and inspect pop-up. This will bring up this familiar DevTools window, and in here, if there are any console log statements, we will receive here. Also, we can inspect all the elements of the pop-up through this DevTools window here. As I said, this doesn't have access to the DOM, hence why we have a new DevTools window to inspect the pop-up. There is an issue now that, let's say I enable the design mode. If I click again here on the pop-up, you will see it says enable again. And this is because we don't persist the state anywhere, and every time this is a new instance of it. So to fix this, we are going to make use of session storage. And first, let's go here in the content script and create two functions, one for saving state. We'll accept an argument called payload, and here we have access to the session storage. I will call it as just simply state. We are going to stringify the payload. I'm stringifying it because the payload will be an object. And we also need to get the state. So I'm creating a get state function here. And I'm getting the state and I'm returning a get state type of message. And here I'm checking if there is a state in the session storage already to parse it as it's stringified, else provide a default, which is the current value for design mode. Now what we need to do is, when we click here, the pop-up needs to request from the content script the current state. So here we provided the get state and the save state, and now we need to get it from the pop-up. So we will create an init function here, which will broadcast the message get state. And when this window loads, we want to call this function here. So with everything in place, now we need to handle response here. So we will create another case called get state. And I am going to assign this to a state variable here. And state will be the payload of the response. Now I'm going to do some minor duplication. And what I want to do is if from the state the design mode is on, I will show disable, else I will show enable. And again, we need to break here. But before checking the work we've done, we need to save the state here. So that each time we toggle, we need to save the state with the design mode value to be the current design mode. Also, another thing that we forgot to do is actually handle and call a function when this message is received. So we need to add here get state, which we'll call actual get state method. And also let's move the actions at the bottom so that we don't have reference problems like so. Let's reload. Let's try this out. Enable design mode. Now let's see if the state persists. Yes, so now it says disable. So let's disable. Okay, let's move on to actually taking screenshots after we've done our changes here. And yeah, the first thing we're going to do is add a handler on the button itself. So document get element by ID. The name of the ID of the button is this. On click, take screenshot method. It's defined here. and we will broadcast a new message type capture this time. And yeah, we are pretty much done with the pop-up. So now let's move on to the content script. We will create here a handler for this. We will call it capture. And we're going to capture the visible tab. So let's create the function for it. So Chrome provides an API for capturing the visible part of the tab. So that's the main limitation in what I'm going to show you. It only captures what it sees. If the page is long, like in this case, it would only take what it's in the viewport right now. But I will leave it to you guys to extend the functionality of this extension. And yeah, let's just show how it's done to at least take a screenshot of this viewport, and I'll leave it to you for the rest. Now, let's access the API from Chrome. To do that, this is where the background script comes into play. So the limitation of the content script is that it doesn't have access to the whole array of APIs provided by Chrome, and that's why we need the background script. The background script has access to all the APIs available, and we will now send a message from the content script, which has access to the DOM, to the background script, which has the required access that we need to capture the image. So we're going to send a new message called capture visible tab. And now when this is triggered, we need to listen for it here in the background script. And here we want to receive the message, so we're going to add a listener with receive the request and the sender. And because we're only having one action here, I'm going to access directly without checking the request. I'm accessing the capture visible tab API, and here we're passing null as the first argument. The format we want to be a PNG, and when this is in the callback function, we will receive a base64 image which we need to reply back to content script with the message draw image, and the payload is data URI. So I'm going to create this function here. It takes a type and payload, and as we did before, we're accessing the current tab. And we're sending the message to the first one in the array with the type draw image and the payload. That's all we have to do in the background script. Now let's switch back to the content script, and we need to add a handler here. It's called draw image, and we will call the draw image method. Let's first define two arguments here, and I will explain later how they will be used. And here let's create the function draw image. We're receiving the base64 image. Here we are going to make a check if there's no canvas defined. We're first creating canvas, and the reason for this is that this is a way to draw the image in the canvas, and from there we are going to generate an actual image and have the browser trigger download. So first we're defining the dimensions of the canvas, which we are defining here that it needs to be the viewport dimensions with inner height and inner width, and by assigning to the context variable the context object from canvas. So the context object basically helps us manipulate canvas, and that's why I define it in the CTX, as we will need access at a later stage, like so. First we're creating a new image object, and here we're calling the onload, which will use a context to draw the image. We provide the image, and we want the destination to start drawing from the top left corner at 0 pixels for both horizontally and vertically. I won't go into much detail how this works. You can feel free to check it out later. And now we need to actually pass the data URI to the image source. So by adding this, we now trigger the onload event on the image, which in return will draw an image in the canvas like so. And now we want to trigger and download. So let's create the method here. I will explain in a second, so bear with me. So basically what we're doing here is creating an element, in this case a link, a tag. We're defining in the download attribute the file name we want to use. In the href we provide again a base64 image as received from the canvas, and then we click on the link. This will trigger the download dialog of the browser. But before actually testing this, we need to provide the data URI here. So when we call the method for it, we need to provide the request.payload. So let's reload our extension. Let's enable the design mode, make a few changes here. And now let's take a screenshot. Perfect. As you can see, the screenshot that was generated only had the visible part of the viewport. And yeah, I've tried to find a way to get the whole page, because you can actually do it with the DevTools, but it seems from a Chrome extension it's not available. There are some workarounds like virtually scrolling the page, getting and stitching many screenshots together, passing them to Canvas and generate an image. But I will leave this to you as an exercise if you're up for it. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.